The freezer is still cold on the first morning, and that detail matters more than people realize. The food inside it will stay safe for roughly 48 hours if the door stays closed, maybe 72 if it's full and well insulated. Most people open it immediately, checking, reassuring themselves, losing the cold air they need to preserve. That first small decision sets a pattern that plays out across the next 4 weeks. The power went out sometime around 2 a.m., and by 6 a.m. the neighborhood is quiet in an unfamiliar way. No hum of appliances, no traffic light cycling, no distant HVAC units cycling on and off. The silence itself is a signal most people don't register as one. Cell networks stay partially functional for the first 12 to 18 hours, as backup generators at towers burn through diesel. After that, text messages begin queuing, then failing, then stopping entirely in most areas. The window for coordinating with family members outside your immediate location closes faster than anyone expects. Water pressure holds in most municipal systems for 24 to 72 hours after pump stations lose power, depending on local infrastructure and elevation. This creates a false window. Taps still work, toilets still flush, and normalcy bias fills the gap. The impulse is to wait and see if this resolves on its own before doing anything uncomfortable. That waiting period is when most of the early recoverable preparation time disappears. By hour 36, a family that hasn't filled bathtubs, containers, and every clean vessel they own is already behind. The average person needs roughly 2 liters of drinking water per day at minimum. More in heat, more under physical stress. Sanitation adds another 4 to 6 liters per person per day if you're maintaining basic hygiene and toilet function. A family of 4 is looking at 25 to 30 liters per day just to function at a minimal level. Without stored water or a reliable source, the math tightens very quickly. By day 3, the neighborhood starts to show its divisions clearly. Houses with generators are running lights and pulling attention from the street at night. That visibility has a cost that generator owners often haven't thought about. Noise, light, and the smell of exhaust all signal that someone nearby has resources. In the first week, that signal mostly attracts curious neighbors, not threats. But the calculus shifts as days accumulate and stores stay closed, and frustration builds in people who aren't managing well. The refrigerated food is gone by day 4 for most households that didn't make early decisions. Shelf-stable food, canned goods, dried beans, rice, oats, pasta, becomes the entire nutritional universe. The problem isn't usually quantity in the first 2 weeks. It's variety, caloric density, and the mental weight of repetition. By day 5, children in particular begin showing behavioral changes from the disruption of routine, sleep quality, and diet shift. Adults manage that, but it adds cognitive load at exactly the moment when cognitive load needs to stay manageable. Cooking without power is solvable, but it requires fuel, propane, charcoal, wood, and a safe outdoor space. Indoor cooking with any combustion source creates carbon monoxide risk, which kills silently and in volumes most people underestimate. This becomes one of the more serious hazards of the early period. Not violence, not starvation. A camp stove used in an apartment kitchen. The absence of police isn't an immediate crisis in most neighborhoods during the first 72 hours. Community norms and uncertainty both function as behavioral anchors in the early phase. People are still expecting resolution, still performing normalcy, still watching to see what others do. The erosion happens gradually, and it doesn't look like crime first. It looks like small boundary violations. A neighbor's garden raided, a car left unlocked, then not. Tension at a shared water spigot. These are signals of escalating resource pressure, and they usually appear before any overt confrontation. The people who navigate this period best are generally the ones who invest heavily in neighborhood relationships early. Information becomes one of the most valuable resources within the first week. A battery-powered radio or a hand crank unit becomes the difference between knowing what's happening regionally and operating entirely blind. Most households don't own one, and by day 2, the store shelves are bare of anything useful. Health begins to degrade in ways people don't attribute to the situation at first. Sleep quality drops without climate control. Too hot in summer, too cold in late fall or winter. Poor sleep compounds decision-making problems, shortens patience, and increases the physical toll of manual tasks. By day 7, someone in almost every affected household is dealing with a minor health issue. A cut that needs cleaning, a medication running low, a stomach problem from food handling errors. Without functioning pharmacies or urgent care, minor problems require more careful management than they would normally. By the end of the first week, the mental model most people carried into the crisis has collapsed. The assumption was, this would resolve in a day or two, someone would fix it, normalcy would return. When that doesn't happen, There's a psychological recalibration that takes energy most people don't have left to spare. Grief is the right word for it, even if it sounds dramatic. The loss of the expected version of the near future. People who adapt fastest are usually the ones who accept the new baseline quickly without excessive resistance. Not optimism, not stoicism. Just a functional adjustment that frees up mental capacity for actual problems. Week 2 is where water becomes the dominant daily pressure in most grid-down scenarios. Whatever was stored is being consumed, and sourcing decisions that were theoretical in Week 1 are now immediate. Rainwater collection works if you have containers, clean gutters, and enough precipitation, none of which can be assumed. Natural sources nearby, streams, retention ponds, standing water, are not safe to drink without treatment. Boiling is effective but requires fuel, time, and heat management, all of which are finite. Filtration systems help with sediment and biological contaminants, but don't address chemical pollution in urban water sources. This is a detail that matters in cities specifically. Urban stormwater carries fuel runoff, fertilizer, heavy metals, and waste in concentrations that a basic filter won't fully address. Physical output also drops across Week 2 as caloric intake becomes more restricted and monotonous. The body begins adjusting, lowering core temperature slightly, reducing spontaneous movement, prioritizing essential function. You feel it as fatigue that doesn't fully lift after sleep, a heaviness in the legs, difficulty concentrating on multi-step tasks. This isn't starvation yet, but it's the body beginning to run lean, and people often misread it as illness. Around day 10 to 12, social structures in the neighborhood begin to formalize in one direction or another. Either people organize, sharing resources, establishing informal watch rotations, pooling information, or they fragment. Fragmentation usually happens when early resource hoarding created enough resentment to make cooperation feel unsafe. The families who shared something small in the first week, a meal, a generator charge, information about road conditions, tend to be in networks by Week 2. The ones who lock down completely often find themselves isolated exactly when isolation becomes costly. Sanitation is the slow-building hazard that most grid-down scenarios underestimate at every time horizon. Human waste management without functioning sewage is a genuine public health problem within 2 weeks in dense environments. Latrines, waste separation, hand-washing discipline, and distance from water sources aren't dramatic topics, but they determine whether a community stays functional or begins circulating disease. Diarrheal illness in a resource-constrained environment is serious quickly. It accelerates dehydration, depletes electrolytes, and removes people from productivity at exactly the wrong time. Week 3 brings a particular kind of emotional flatness that is distinct from the acute stress of the early days. The crisis has become the new normal, and with that comes a dangerous reduction in vigilance. People begin taking small risks they wouldn't have taken in Week 1, eating questionable food, skipping water treatment steps, letting security habits slip because nothing bad has happened yet. This is the false safety signal phase, and it tends to precede the most preventable problems of the entire period. Physical condition by day 20 reflects every decision made in the preceding 3 weeks. Hands are rougher, sleep debt is real, weight loss is visible in most people who haven't managed caloric intake carefully. Minor injuries accumulate, blisters, muscle soreness, small cuts that were ignored and are now mildly infected. None of these are catastrophic individually, but collectively, they represent a system running below its design capacity. Medication depletion becomes serious for anyone managing chronic conditions. Hypertension, diabetes, asthma, thyroid disorders. This is one of the least dramatized but most consequential aspects of extended grid-down survival in developed populations. By day 2000, the communities that organized early have developed informal economies based on skill, labor, and barter. The most valuable people are rarely who you'd expect. Not the loudest, not the most physically imposing. It's the person who knows how to purify water reliably, the one who can treat an infected wound, the one who keeps a calm head in group decisions. Practical knowledge and interpersonal trust are the actual currencies of the late-stage scenario. The person who stored 6 months of food but alienated every neighbor often ends up negotiating from a weaker position than they imagined. Day 30 arrives not with a dramatic resolution, but with a kind of quiet inventory. What did you actually consume? What actually ran out? What held in ways you didn't predict? Most people who've worked through realistic grid-down simulations report the same unexpected finding. The logistics were hard, but the social dimension was harder. Managing relationships under sustained stress, making group decisions with incomplete information, maintaining trust when resources are tight. These were the skills that determined outcomes. The physical survival elements, food, water, heat, sanitation, are learnable and largely manageable with preparation. The human elements are less predictable and far more exhausting than any supply calculation suggests. If any of this feels relevant to your actual situation, the right move is to connect with local emergency management resources, community preparedness groups, and professionals who train specifically for extended disruption scenarios. What this kind of scenario teaches, more than any single tactic, is that preparation is mostly done before the event, not during it.